Hello ArenaNet, my name is Mind Circus. You may remember me from such roasts as Why the Story Sucks According to Archie Andrews, or Jadebot. Recently, I found what I believe to be a bug in your game. I'm unable to choose End of Dragon stats on my stat-selectable Ascended Trinkets. Hey, I even wrote a bug report that was professionally formatted and just needed to be cut and pasted into your Jira for your software developers. Now, it's come to my attention that this may not be a bug, that you have intentionally made these stat sets available only to legendary gear on purpose. It was theorized that this is a way to drive players to the new content. The theory points to the ambiguous language used in the announcement of these stat sets. This is ambiguous language that was not present when you announced the change to stat-selectable trinkets that said stat selections available were dependent on the owned expansions. Now, as someone who spent a good 3 weeks of my playtime prior to the expansion farming up stat-selectable trinkets and armor boxes, I said to myself, hey, my old pal Anet wouldn't do me dirty like this, right? Right? Kate, thank you. Fix it. Love you. Eckeveld Forest is great. Bye. Hey, what's good everyone? You got Mind Circus here with you, and welcome to another Mind Over Meta open world build. And today we are going to be taking a look at Mesmer and Virtuoso, the new spec from End of Dragons. If you are new to the channel, new to Guild Wars 2, just haven't done so yet, I am currently farming likes and subscribes in an effort to build the channel. If you want to hook me up with one of those just below the video, that would be great. And with that out of the way, hey, it's no secret, I suck at Mesmer. I have been pretty clear about that on this channel. It's like most people, it's the clone mechanics. I find them a little bit confusing, and I think that most people will agree that that's where it comes out. The other side is that Mesmer plays unlike any other class or spec in any other MMO. It's absolutely one of these beautiful kind of unique playstyles that I just don't think we see in just about any other game. So when I sat down and took a good long look at Mesmer, I decided that where Virtuoso best fit was as some kind of ranged DPS option, sort of like Longbow Ranger, Deadeye, or whatever Ellie mains were whining about for with the Longbow. This is good news because Mesmer's kit is very well suited to this, and we get a lot of really good ranged options as far as weapons. As far as performance, this build handled everything it needs to in terms of the open world experience and events and champions. Champions fall really quick and easy, trash mobs are cake. This build boon buffs itself with 3 of the 4 most important offensive boons in the game. Downside is this: while in its simplest form, it does its job very admirably. It's able to take everything out that it needs to really put it on another level. We're going to have to L2P a little bit. And for those of you who have never heard the term, L2P means learn to play. We're not going to be investing much in passive sustain, unlike other builds on this channel. Instead, we're going to focus on a more active form of mitigation to keep ourselves alive while still doing solid DPS. It's a little more selfish than the last couple of builds that I've put up on the channel, though it does bring a couple of really nice things to the party. And at its most basic, this build does what it needs to. It provides a really fun, easy way to onboard into Mesmer and give some solid group benefit. But when played correctly, in the right gear, this becomes one of the more fun and interesting builds I have ever put up on the channel. So let's take a look at building gear. So if you follow my channel and you are at all used to the order in which I do things, usually at this point I am going to take a look at the gear. I am actually going to start with build this time because build doesn't change, but there is a bit of a progression with the gear that I want to talk about and may take a few moments. So let's get into the easy part first because I am all about the low-hanging fruit. Let us go and let us take a look at our build. Now in our build we will be using Domination. We will be using Illusions, we will be using Virtuoso. Bountiful Blades improves Greatsword skills, Mirror Blade bounces additional times, and Phantasmal Berserker summons an additional Berserker and deals less damage. We will be rocking Greatsword on this build. Usually I would want to focus on the actual new weapon that came with the elite spec. That said, the new weapon is great. We want to be swapping weapons a lot, and Greatsword is a natural fit for this build, so we'll take a little look further into it in a little bit. Furious Interruption. Gain quickness when you interrupt a foe. This will be really nice. And Shatter skills deal more damage. In the case of Virtuoso, this will count as your blades. We will get into all of that in the gameplay section, I assure you. Illusions. Let's look at illusions. We have Persistence of Memory. When a phantasm becomes a clone, it transfers its boons to you. This becomes really important as we learn to play this a little harder. Phantasmal Haste. Phantasms spawn with quickness. Gain quickness when you create a phantasm. Probably seeing where I'm going with that little interaction. And finally, Phantasms deal increased strike damage for each stack of might you have. Gain might when your phantasms become clones. Starting to see where we're going with this, I hope. Finally, under Virtuoso, we will be running Blade Turn Refrain. Blade songs grant you Aegis. In terms of what that means that these skills here, your Blade songs, your 1 to 4, your F1 to 4, will be granting Aegis with no cooldown. That is really awesome. That's all I'm going to say at this point. We'll talk about it more in the gameplay section. Duelist Reversal. Blocking or dodging an attack grants boons. We will be doing a fair bit of blocking on this, so we will absolutely get a lot of value from this. And finally, Psychic Riposte. Blocking or dodging an attack stocks blades and causes your next blade song to be unblockable. So really, I hope you're kind of seeing what we're getting at here. And obviously, this is all going to come together a little more in the gameplay section. But what we're going to be doing is a ranged burst build that is going to permanently stack quickness, might, and fury on us and do a buttload of damage while also providing mitigation in terms of Aegis and blocks. Now that's a really kind of complicated way to say we will be shooting things from long range and blocking stuff. It's that simple. That is our build. Again, we will get into the details of how this works during the gameplay section. Let's go ahead and take our look at equipment now. Now, equipment, I am going to say do as I say and not as I do if you are a new player at Mesmer or a less than confident Mesmer player. If you are a less than confident Mesmer player and would very much like to play some Mesmer, the absolute best way to start playing this build is to go into 100% Marauders. Marauders will give you the lowest damage, the best survivability, and it's not going to provide us a ton of boons. Really, it's all about the survivability. If you are just onboarding into this and you want to learn how to play it, and you take a look at my gameplay section, particularly the first part of it, and you say, oh, well, I can do that, then get yourself into some Marauders gear and start doing it. Now, our second step will be Commander's gear. After testing it out, the Commander's gear was a DPS increase with a small step down in terms of the survivability. We're trading off a lot of vitality for a bit of toughness. In open world, you know, one is almost as good as the other in terms of toughness and vitality. You know, the choice becomes a lot more important in world versus world than it does in the game. The downside to that is that anything with toughness, you want to make sure that you're avoiding raid encounters. Now, I'm not going to tell you to raid on this build. I've not tested it in raids, and I don't believe it would be a solid DPS option. But of course, the tanking mechanics in raids does kind of prohibit you from putting any toughness on your gear. That said, if you're just in open world, absolutely hook this up in this and learn to start booning yourself. Now that will also be in the gameplay section, because there is the first way to play this, which is just running around in open world doing some damage, and then we'll take a look at how to start stacking boons on ourselves with a little bit of rotation, in which case we want to be using Commander's gear. The next step will be what I'm running, and what I am running is largely, okay, when we're taking a look at this, this is largely Diviner's gear. That said, you will notice I am also putting in a few pieces of Assassin's gear, so let's talk about that. The step up from Commander's gear will be Diviner's gear. What that will do is allow us to do a decent amount of damage and keep those boons up on us, because obviously, as I'm mentioning, we want to be stacking boons on ourselves. When you get to a certain point, those boons are going to be well overcapped, well over time. You are going to walk out of a fight and for about 6 to 8 seconds still be under the impact of quickness. You start to realize the waste involved, and then what you want to do is slowly start swapping out a few pieces of the Diviner's gear for Assassins in order to bring your crit rate up. So when we take a look at the crit rate here, we're looking at 50%. The way this is done, this actually works out to 90% with Fury and a trait in Virtuoso. So that obviously will keep us right where we need to be, but keeping in mind that really we want to go from a sustaining option to a boon upkeep option to a boon upkeep option that doesn't kind of overcap all of its boons is the best way to go. And the way that we'll do that is going from Marauders to Commanders to Diviners. And all I'm going to say is choose where you fit. If you're an accomplished Mesmer player and you would like to play this build specifically after taking a look at it, then I'm going to say, you know, start right at the end and let's go and put on that Diviner's gear with some Assassins, as much Assassins as you can take to get yourself near the crit cap, with food, etc., and you'll have a good idea. Now, in the armor, we will be running our good old friend, the Pack Rune. The Pack Rune is one way that we will be generating Fury. The build itself doesn't generate a ton of Fury, but it upkeeps it quite well. Without these runes, you will not be able to keep up Fury. Now, Fury obviously is really important. The other bonus to this is when we're using these Pack Runes, that actually spreads out. Please use the Pack Runes. Do not use the Firework Runes. And the reason I say this is because you think you're playing the game solo, but you're never playing Guild Wars 2 solo, and the moment you jump into a meta group, you want to make sure that you're at least providing some benefit to the people around you. So there we have that. So we are running that. Now, in terms of the weapons, we will be using the Greatsword with our old pals, the Strength and Force sigils, and we will be using, all right, Dagger, Pistol. And again, with these, we are going to want to run these with the Superior Sigil of Force and the Superior Sigil of Strength. Nothing really kind of, out there in terms of the way that this works. We will take a look at it in the gameplay section. But that, my friends, is building gear. Let's go ahead at this point and let's get into some fashion. Not sure what to tell you guys, but if you take a look at my transmutation charges, you're going to see why I have to start playing some World versus World soon. That's ridiculous. And this tune right here is the reason. Going through 3 different armor sets and testing and wastefully transmuting a bunch of the pieces has left me in this situation. That said, was it worth it? Was my sacrifice worth it? Because I had to go complete some cities in Corteria to get this. Let's pull this up here. All right, for fashion, we will be using the winged headpiece. The winged headpiece, an old piece of core equipment. This hood I really like. Unfortunately, the lighting, it is night right now. We can't see the other color in here very well, but I assure you it's there, and it is beautiful. We're going to be using the Salt Spray Dragon Scarf. The Salt Spray Dragon Scarf, one of these incredible new pieces in the new content. You can get it from a heart vendor. The Salt Spray Dragon Scarf is absolutely beautiful. I will link a video down below by one of my favorite content creators. Okay, it's me. That actually shows you how to get that and which heart vendor has it. We will be using the Diviner's Phoenix Vest. The Phoenix Vest is a gem store piece of equipment, largely based on Lady Casimir Mead's first outfit, I believe. We're going to be using Piercing Aria. These gloves, again, I will explain in the video that I am linking about cosmetics. However, the short end of the stick is you get these for completing Virtuoso. They are absolutely gorgeous. They have great dye channels. I cannot recommend those gloves enough. We will be using the guild pants. The guild pants are something that you can craft once you are in a guild that is sufficiently large and has access to the correct vendor. You can obviously just go join one of those big guilds with the fake giveaways and the marching around and the spam and everything. You can join one of them for a couple of days, go hook yourself up, get those recipes for those pants. There's a few different pieces of guild armor that I think are worth it. These pants are the #1 reason to join a crappy big guild. And finally, we will be using the Glorious Footgear. The Glorious Footgear found in SPVP. I actually had a stat selectable armor chest from PvP and got those boots from them. Very nice set of boots. Taking a look at the weapons, for the weapons, and I will bring this up, I am using the Dragon Slayer Dagger. This will obviously be found in Icebrood Saga content, and I really like this dagger. I tried a few different skins, kind of settled on the low option. You know, the thing about this spec is it's crapping out particle effects everywhere. You don't need to add to that. In terms of the weapon here, this is the flintlock pistol. This is a piece of core equipment. Man, it can be hard to find a decently sized pistol in this game. So many of the pistols are just, comically huge. So you generally have to go into the core equipment every once in a while. Other options here will be the Whisper Secret pistol, which may be a little bit long, but has that nice silencer on the end of it. That would be one I might try. And finally, I will be using, just for the means of being in Cantha, we will be using Belinda's Greatsword. Belinda's Greatsword, one of the few katana skins in the game. Very, very beautiful sword. Obviously, it doesn't have, Marjorie's sister inhabiting it, which makes it a little bit better for me. Let's look at dyes really quickly here. A couple of high contrast dyes that we are using. For the purples, we are going to be using mainly Bloodstone Violet. We are also using Blacklight on a couple of pieces. For the the lighter one, we'll be using Blue Steel. Alright, for the muted purple, we'll be using Blue Whale. And for all of the golds, we will be using Gold Fusion. If you don't have Gold Fusion, I highly recommend it. It's one of the better gold dyes in the game that doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, I guess is the best way to put it. So, with that all said, let's get to the raid training area and figure out how to play Mesmer. Alright, let's learn to play Mesmer, shall we? Or rather, let's learn to play this flavor of Mesmer. This is, really dumbed down. Virtuoso is indeed like the easy version of Mesmer, very much like, say, Soul Beast was the easy version of Ranger. This is really kind of the way it takes a lot of the complexity out of the spec and delivers a little simpler kind of option for you. So let's get into how it works. The first thing to know about this build is that both of the auto attacks on it, the weapons on it, are heavy ranged options. And when we talk about ranged options, let's look at this. Start attacking and we can see it's a 1200. It's beautiful. It's like longbow. We can just sit back for here as long as we want and do our damage. Now, this is obviously, good in some ways. It can build bad habits in other ways when it comes to instanced content. This is a drum I have banged before. If you are playing in instanced content, even if you are a ranged person, please stack with your group in front of the enemy. It's just better that way for about 80 different reasons. But we do have, as we are rolling around, our long-ranged option on the Greatsword. The important parts to know about this will be, the 1, the auto attack, the 2, which is nice damage, the 3, which is an area cripple, which can be really helpful, and the 4, which is spawning phantasms, the 5, which is going to do break bar damage. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is true for quite a few options in this game, is that when we flip to the other weapons, these weapons do very much similar things, with the exception of the cripple on the 3. Damage, 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 phantasm generator, CC. And then when we look, damage, damage, sort of damage, phantasm generator, CC. This is true for a lot of options on Mesmer. So if you kind of get your head around that basic fact, you can start looking at other weapons. Other options might be the focus. The focus is really nice for CC and aggro management, and it's something you may want to look at. I just prefer the pistol for a lot of reasons. It's nice damage, it's nice CC. So, we'll look at the CC options when we get into the CC portion, but the basics is we're going to sit there from range and we're going to be hitting things. All right. So that is at its basics what we will be doing. And if we're doing that, we are doing it in Marauder's gear. Now, taking a look at our bar real quick, we're going to be using Signet of Ether. Signet of Ether is going to be generating us a little bit of passive sustain. This is the only passive sustain we're going to get. Okay, we're going to be using Rain of Swords. Rain of Swords is area AoE damage. All right. We're going to be using Phantasmal Defender. Phantasmal Defender, we are primarily going to be using this to generate Phantasm. And again, we'll talk about this in a few moments. That said, it's also a really strong CC option, and we'll look at that in the CC section. We are going to be running Mantra of Concentration. We're going to be running Mantra of Concentration for 2 reasons. One, it's a stun break. Not only is it a stun break, it's a stun break on an ammo skill, which means obviously we can fire it off, and then 2 seconds later fire it off again. The other thing to know about this is it generates, with the armor that we have on, 5 and a quarter seconds of stability. Now, that generates it for our group. This, in addition to the runes that we're running, are going to be, the group benefit that we're bringing. We want to be bringing some, and this is one of the best ways to do it. When you're looking at things like, say, the final encounter in the game in open world, the big meta with the turtle trouble, stab becomes really important, and being able to generate it on your subgroup is really essential. And finally, we are running 1,000 Cuts. There are other options here, but 1,000 Cuts is a nice DPS increase. The other options, not so great. We could run the Well here, not the Well, but Time Warp. Time Warp's not bad, but I prefer 1,000 Cuts. We don't really want to put Signet of Humility in here because this build does enough CC on its own that we really don't need to invest in it. So that really is kind of the basics. Now, let's take a look at the class mechanic. The class mechanic is these little bulbs here that are over our shatter skills. Now, our shatter skills are gone, taken place by blade songs If we hit this, then we lose all these. These will slowly come up. Now, we can fire off one of these blade songs pretty quickly. All right, as soon as we have one of these, all right, stocked, we can fire this off. But in most cases, we are going to want to prefer to fire this off when we have more blades stocked. So that is kind of what is important. This is specifically important for the first two. Now, let's take a look at the blade songs for a moment. The blade songs are the quote-unquote replacement for shatters. What is important to know is that they do kind of the same things in very much the same ways. The weapons repeated some basic functionality. Okay, we have power DPS, condi DPS, CC, and an oh shit button. The oh shit button here is a big block. Now, as I pointed out in the build section, the block will become obviously more important. So really, particularly with the first two, we want to make sure that we are stocking these blades as high as we can. As we are in general combat, these will start coming up a fair bit quicker. So at its most basic, we remember a couple of things. Number one is we are going to be getting Aegis off our blade songs. When we get Aegis off our blade songs, that means that these blade songs become a block. If we are using these as a defensive tool, we can mitigate a whole lot of damage. That's up and down. Obviously, a big part of our damage is going to come off blade song harmony. The block and the CC, we don't want to obviously be firing off cooldown. We want to be keeping these for their intended purposes. The block here being a really big kind of example of that. But we can obviously fire off the two or any of these at any point when we know a big hit is coming and we want to proc a little bit of Aegis. The other thing is we're naturally using these, the Aegis will proc and we will run into situations where that damage just gets mitigated on its own and we don't have to worry about it. This at its essence is the simplest way to play it. So we will just be firing our ranged options, swapping our ranged options, doing our damage, and that is about it. And if that's all you're managing, in addition to proccing the stab on your group at the right points and staying out of red circles, this is at its very essence a really good place to start. And you'll start doing this in the Marauder's gear, like I mentioned during the equipment section. So let's get into some next level gameplay and talk about phantasms. A normal Mesmer has phantasms and clones. Virtuoso has phantasms and your little sky daggers that will point at people you're talking to. We've gone over how to use the sky dagger. Let's talk about the phantasms really quickly because this becomes essential as we're looking to take this to another level and get those boons on ourselves. So let's take a look at that. On the 4 of both weapons, both in Phantasmal Berserker, okay, and in Phantasmal Duelist, and over here with Phantasmal Defender, we will be summoning a Phantasm. Let's take a quick look at summoning the Phantasm. We summon the Phantasm does his attacks, disappears, and oh, suddenly we got a crap load of boons, including a whole bunch of fury. We had quickness for a few seconds there, and that really is kind of where we're going to start. And then suddenly our might is near capped, or it's kind of going up and down, so we'll keep a look at that. So what would happen then in this case is if I were right up here and I summon that, flip my weapon, summon the next one, put the next one down. Once those are all gone, look at this. I have a whole lot of might, a whole lot of quickness, a whole lot of fury, and some swiftness. This really puts us on a different level in terms of our damage and our utility. We have permanent quickness. We have 25 stacks of might. We have permanent fury. We're doing big damage. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the ability to actively mitigate the incoming damage with the Aegis, as well as naturally using our position from the enemies. So if we're not in instance content, obviously, you know, we've got the luxury of being able to hit things long before they hit us in many cases. So that is going to be the way that we start to take this to a next level. And when we do that, we want to be either in the Commander's or the Diviner's gear. If we're not in those gear sets, the quickness is not going to maintain and the might is not going to be there as much as we would hope. So once again, let's just go over this really quickly. Let's spawn a Phantasm. Let's swap weapons, spawn another Phantasm. Okay, and then let's go ahead and put the Phantasmal Defender down, and suddenly, you know, we've got, you know, the boons that we were typically looking for. So that, in addition to what's coming off when we initially enter combat with the pack runes that we're running, is going to keep those boons, is going to generate them and keep them on us as long as we need to for the duration of the fight. As long as we are making sure that we're hitting our Phantasms pretty much off cooldown in open world, that is going to leave us where we need to be. So let's take a quick little look at the way that all comes together. I'm going to go ahead here and just quickly despawn. Alright, so we'll remove the current golem, we'll respawn the current golem, and we'll head back at it. So now when we go into combat, we're going to generate our boons. Alright, we're going to just do our thing, and as those blade songs go out, we're going to fire at particularly that first one off cooldown. Definitely want to save that second one for the Aegis, but you can see where we're going there. As the blade songs swap up, I will make sure that I'm using that. In combat with many enemies, those blade songs are going to stock up way quicker, and probably even stock up quicker than you can use them regarding the cooldowns under them. Now, if that is not the case, if you run into a situation where you are not running or not generating your blade songs quick enough, what I will do is urge you to pull up your build and swap this Psychic Riposte for Infinite Forge, which will automatically stock blades while you're in combat and just bring those blades up automatically if you're struggling. That is really important, particularly that F1 blade song is really stupidly powerful and can end up doing a lot of damage. So that is the way I am going to, again, recommend that you kind of put this into the previous rotation. If you can manage that, then you have managed pretty much what you need to make this the fun, enjoyable experience that you want. So, quick look at CC, and there is a ton of it. I have a standard break bar. It's not a weak break bar, but we have a pretty decent break bar on this. Let's take a look. The first thing we'll do is we'll take a look at Phantasmal Defender, which does its taunt. When that comes up, it puts that taunt down on that enemy. That is a significant amount of break bar pressure. The next thing is the blade song on the 3. We will hit this. This is a daze and some vuln. Absolutely huge amount of CC right there. On the weapons, we have a couple of options. As I mentioned, we get the 3 on Greatsword, which is some soft CC via Cripple. That'll start coming down, not very quickly, but it does move a little bit. We have the big CC, Illusionary Wave, off the 5. Let's put that down. You might be tempted to run the CC power from the new psionic abilities. Don't. You already have one power that's going to push mobs away and make you annoying to the melee people in your group. If you're firing it off cooldown, please don't add another one. Just, you know, stick with what you got here. We will swap weapons real quick, okay? And our next option here will be on the 5. The 5 is a huge amount of CC. We'll also get some cripple off the 3. And those are our CC options. You can see that will bring a break bar down in a pretty quick amount of time. And really, this is a absolutely magnificent spec for break bar. If you are one of those people who may struggle with break bar, there are other options in the kit here. I would not, however, suggest getting rid of Phantasmal Defender. If I was going to get rid of one, I would likely get rid of Rain of Swords. I like the vulnerability, but if I had to choose one utility off this bar to swap out, I would probably take Rain of Swords out and look for some CC that way. And that, my friends, is CC. So there you have it, folks. This is Virtuoso in a nutshell. There is a lot more you can do with this specific build. I've really kind of tried to keep the newbie element to it and keep it really accessible. I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes of other things we could do with it. I would expect that you would learn to do those things yourself after you kind of get comfortable with this. I really hope you enjoy it. This one has been one of those high adrenaline damage dealing, a little bit glassy but not awful kind of specs that really I gravitate towards in MMOs. So this is a really fun playstyle and really recommend it. It's not expensive if you're putting it in the Marauders gear, but I will recommend moving out of that Marauders gear as soon as possible. And if you're kind of newer, running into the Commanders, if you are a more experienced player, let's get into that Diviner's gear, swap out a few pieces for the Assassin's gear, and really start looking for that damage. With that said, hey, I'm going to thank you guys all very much for watching. It really is my pleasure to put these videos together for you, and I'm glad for those of you who kind of stick around and watch the whole thing. It really makes me happy. I am going to remind you to have fun in game and min-max your real life. And I'm glad we took this moment. We'll see you next time.